The following is not a true story, but they say it began in old Baghdad centuries ago, before the city drowned in dust and time. Back then, there was a man who never slept. He was an astronomer, and he used to sit on his rooftop all night, studying the stars. He wasn't like other scholars. He didn't pray, he barely ate, and he hardly spoke to anyone anymore. Soon, he started asking questions about God and about whether anyone was really listening up there. But his doubt came at a price. They say a powerful force answered him and punished his pride. That man, Jimmy, was imprisoned inside a brass lamp and thrown 1,000 years into the future, into 20th century London, a strange world where it rained every day and where the stars he loved so much could no longer be seen. In that small London apartment, there was a television. The voice told him the TV was a time-traveling device, his only way home, but he couldn't use it on his own. Someone had to find the lamp and wipe it clean first. Only then could he cross back through. Whoever touched the lamp would become his master, and he would be forced to serve them. Then the screen went dark, the voice faded. While Jimmy vanished into the future, Baghdad carried on as if nothing had happened. The sun rose, the city woke, and an executioner named Mustafa was getting ready for another public killing. He took his children to the palace square that morning, telling them it was a lesson. The king had ordered his new bride to be executed. That's what the king did every day. Married a new bride at night, then had her killed by morning. No one dared question him. Mustafa pointed his kids to a spot near the platform so they wouldn't miss the lesson. Moments later, the crowd gathered as the palace guards led an attractive young woman named Scheherazade through the square. Mustafa's children didn't understand why she had to die. When they asked, a guard admitted he didn't know, only that the Grand Vizier had commanded it. The children began to cry, and with the guard's permission, Mustafa begged Scheherazade to tell her story before she died. What they didn't know was that Scheherazade had a plan. She began to tell a story about a king everyone admired. Handsome, rich, and loved by all. Every morning, he'd walk through his private garden and pick a single rose for his queen. A perfect one. He did that for 1,001 days. They say he loved her more than he loved his own kingdom. He ignored his concubines, ignored his advisors, even ignored the whispers that the people were turning against him. All he saw was his queen, but love has a way of blinding even the brightest minds. And someone close to him, the Grand Vizier, decided to use that against him. One day when the king returned from a hunting trip, he found his queen in another man's arms. Not just any man, the Grand Vizier himself. In a fit of rage, the king threw things around and the royal bed collapsed on his queen, killing her instantly. The Grand Vizier was caught and punished, of course, but he was clever. He told the king that he had only done it to prove a point, that all women, no matter how beautiful, were weak, disloyal, and dangerous. The king believed him. He spared his life, but from that day on, he swore never to be betrayed again. The Grand Vizier suggested that he marry a new bride every night and have her executed by morning. That way, no one could ever hurt him again. The king agreed and demanded that his first bride be the Grand Vizier's own daughter. The Grand Vizier obeyed, but his daughter was spoiled, lazy, and nowhere near fit to be a queen. And there was another problem. She'd be executed the next morning. He could already see the shame it would bring, so he sent her home and made a different plan. At a crowded market, he saw a slave girl being sold. She was confident, sharp, and unafraid. Her name was Scheherazade. He bought her for 1,000,000 dinars and told her she'd be queen of the kingdom by nightfall. She thought he was joking, but by evening she was dressed in silk, standing before the king himself. She expected music, guests, and celebration. Instead, the hall was empty. The king said nothing. He offered her a ring and declared her his wife. Overwhelmed, Scheherazade fainted. The king slipped the ring on her finger and carried her into his chambers. When she woke, she tried to charm him with a dance. Then she told him they were strangers and that love shouldn't be rushed. The king didn't argue. By dawn, he called for the Grand Vizier and ordered that Scheherazade be executed immediately. Panicking, Scheherazade threatened the Grand Vizier. She whispered that if he didn't help her escape, she'd tell the king her secret, that she wasn't his daughter at all, but a slave he had bought. The Grand Vizier gave in. He smuggled her out of the palace through a hidden passage leading to the market, then returned her to the same merchant he had bought her from. He told the man to take her as far away as possible, but the merchant was greedy. He decided to sell her again. When the bidding began, Scheherazade spotted a homeless-looking young man behind the crowd. She ran to him, pressed her wedding ring into his palm, and told him to use it to buy her. He did, but before they could leave, soldiers appeared, searching for her. She and the young man ran until they lost sight of the guards. He told her his name was Aladdin, a thief who hated stealing. She told him she was the queen of Baghdad and that her husband wanted her dead. They hid in the ruins outside the city where Aladdin lived. By then, Scheherazade was starving. She began digging through Aladdin's pile of stolen junk, looking for something she could sell for food. That's when she found it, a dull, old brass lamp. She thought it might pass for gold if she cleaned it, so as she made her way to the market, she rubbed it. A light came on, and Jimmy, the sleepless astronomer who had vanished 1,000 years into the future, appeared before her. He said he was her servant now, her genie, that he'd grant her anything she wished for. At first she laughed, then she asked for food, a feast like the ones from her time. But Jimmy told her he couldn't make things from her world, only from the 20th century. So she agreed. Jimmy returned to London, grabbed a tray of tea and fruitcake from his confused neighbor's kitchen, and a few moments later reappeared before her. Scheherazade had never seen food like that before. Jimmy told her he had a feeling his boring life was about to get interesting, then vanished back into the lamp. As more people gathered around to listen, Scheherazade kept telling her story. She shared the strange food with Aladdin and told him everything about the genie. Soon she fell asleep, but when she woke the next morning, she was surrounded by soldiers. They arrested her. As the guards dragged her back to the palace, Aladdin panicked. He rubbed the lamp. Jimmy appeared again, saw Scheherazade being taken away, then vanished. Seconds later, he came roaring out of thin air on a motorcycle, the kind that didn't even exist yet in her world. He grabbed Aladdin, and together they chased the guards and rescued Scheherazade. No one could see Jimmy or the bike. To them, Scheherazade and Aladdin simply flew away. They rode deep into the desert until the wheels slipped on the sand and the bike went down. When Jimmy left, Aladdin decided to stay behind. He said he'd found peace in the desert, that it was his paradise, and he never looked back. By this point in her story, all the adults listening in the square had fallen asleep. Only the children remained. Scheherazade could have escaped easily, but they wanted to know what happened next, so she continued. She said months passed after her escape, and the king grew cruel and obsessed with finding her. He married new brides every night, but none could replace her. Then one day, word reached him. She'd been spotted in the desert. He rode out himself, and Scheherazade was caught and thrown into a cage. However, the king released her and told her she could be free again, but only if she swore loyalty to him, if she promised him her heart, her freedom, and her future. But Scheherazade refused and ran. When she reached the edge of a cliff, she rubbed the lamp and Jimmy appeared, this time flying a plane. She grabbed the wing, and together they rose into the air. The king and his guards watched from below, too proud to admit what they were seeing. Scheherazade was flying. By now, the crowd listening to her story had grown larger. Everyone who had fallen asleep woke up again. Escape was no longer an option, so she continued her story. After flying for a while, the plane ran out of fuel. Jimmy handed Scheherazade a parachute and vanished back into the lamp. She jumped and landed in the lap of a sailor named Sinbad. Sinbad believed she was an angel. Before long, they began living together. When money got tight, he told her she could charm anyone with just a glance and suggested she dance at a small bar nearby to earn them some money. Scheherazade agreed, and within days she became famous. People began whispering her name. Within weeks, everyone in town had heard of her beauty. Her fame drew crowds, including the soldiers searching for her. They recognized her, but she wore a jewel on her navel, and when the soldiers looked at it, they became hypnotized. It gave Scheherazade and Sinbad the chance to escape by boat, sailing fast into open water. When Sinbad woke the next morning, hungover and dazed, he saw nothing but endless sea. Scheherazade had sailed them into the middle of nowhere, with no idea where they were or how far they had gone. Meanwhile, back in Baghdad, the king had become convinced Scheherazade possessed magical powers. He summoned the most powerful sorceress in his kingdom to track her down. The woman stared into her crystal ball for hours before gasping. She said she saw something she couldn't explain. A man in strange clothes, sitting in a room, watching Scheherazade through a box of light. The king didn't understand. No one did, and it filled him with rage. Back on the sea, a storm struck, tearing the sail and punching a hole through the hull. The boat began to sink. Sinbad, trembling, confessed he wasn't really a sailor and couldn't swim. He admitted all his tales of adventure were lies he told when he was drunk. The truth was, he'd been terrified of the ocean his entire life. He handed Scheherazade his food and water, thanked her for giving him one real adventure, and jumped. Scheherazade rubbed the lamp, but this time, instead of waiting for the genie to appear, she stepped into his world herself. She pulled Sinbad with her through the TV. Through that strange window of light, Jimmy showed them the wonders of his time. Men walking on the moon and machines that could fly. Scheherazade and Sinbad were in awe. But when Jimmy noticed his lamp sinking beneath the waves, threatening to trap them in his world forever, he sent them back to their raft. A heavy storm struck again, and the waves swept Sinbad away. By morning, the sea was calm. Scheherazade was alone. A pirate ship found her and pulled her aboard. Soon, she took command of the crew. Using one of Jimmy's books, she guided them through storms and across continents, from Africa all the way back to Baghdad. There at the docks, she found Sinbad alive, telling wild stories about the things he'd seen in the genie's world. Everyone who once mocked him now listened like obedient children. Scheherazade also found the king. He was a broken man now, disguised as a nobleman, living in a small camp by the docks. Every day he sat there, staring out at the sea. When she approached him, hidden under her sailor's hood, he spoke of the wife he'd lost. He said she was unforgettable, and he would keep searching until he found her. He didn't recognize Scheherazade, but he let her spend the night in his tent. By morning, he was still awake, still searching. Scheherazade pitied him and revealed herself. The king was overjoyed. She introduced him to Jimmy and told him that he too could live a life of magic, a life where anything he dreamed could happen. The king loved gymnastics, so that night the three of them stayed up planning a show while playing chess. But none of them knew that the Grand Vizier was watching, once again seeing his king abandon the kingdom for love. By morning, the king was cheerful and full of energy, practicing gymnastics again, like a man who had rediscovered his youth. With the help of Scheherazade and Jimmy, he even practiced disappearing tricks. The Grand Vizier eventually realized that Scheherazade wasn't a witch, that the lamp was the true source of her power. The next day, they planned a public show. The Grand Vizier warned the king not to go through with it, saying it was unsafe, that Scheherazade was manipulating him. But the king told him not to worry. The vizier grew furious. Scheherazade had done what no one else could, made the king feel human again. When the show began, Scheherazade stood on stage beside the king. With Jimmy helping behind the scenes, she made the king vanish. The crowd erupted in applause. But while she was distracted, the Grand Vizier stole the lamp, and Scheherazade couldn't bring the king back. The vizier stepped forward and declared that the man who had vanished was actually the king, and that Scheherazade had murdered him with dark magic. Scheherazade was arrested once again. By morning, the Grand Vizier tried to use the lamp to make himself king, but his horse suddenly reared, throwing him off balance. The lamp slipped from his hand and fell into the sea below. Ignoring it, he returned to the palace and announced to the crowd that Scheherazade had killed the king, and that she would be executed at dawn. The crowd hurled fruits at her cage, shouting curses. Scheherazade caught a few and ate them. She was starving. Meanwhile, the king and Jimmy sat in Jimmy's tiny London apartment, watching the TV and waiting for her to rub the lamp. Luckily, a chain of strange events no one could explain began to unfold. The lamp was swallowed by a fish. That fish was caught by a fisherman who took it home for his wife to cook. When she found the dirty old lamp inside, she threw it away in disgust. It rolled off, still covered in fish guts, until a bird swooped down and carried it away. The bird took it to its nest to feed its chicks. As it tried to warm them, it rubbed the lamp. Back in Jimmy's apartment, the king grew impatient and smashed the TV. Jimmy told him to grab a tool from his bike outside so he could fix it. But the moment the king stepped out, dressed in strange clothes, looking completely lost, the police mistook him for a thief and arrested him. By the time Jimmy fixed the television, the bird had already rubbed the lamp, but the king was gone. He quickly returned to Baghdad and found Scheherazade imprisoned inside a metal box. Jimmy told her there would be a delay getting the king back, and that she should tell stories of her adventures to delay the execution until he returned. And that's exactly what she had been doing, right up to this moment in her story. By now, the crowd had fallen in love with her. No one wanted her executed. Even the executioner refused. So the Grand Vizier decided to carry out the execution himself. Meanwhile, Jimmy returned to his world and went to the police station. When he couldn't bear the delay any longer, he grabbed a shotgun, forced the police to release the king, and escaped to Baghdad in a helicopter. To make the king's return look like Scheherazade's magic, they laid a carpet on the floor of the chopper. From the ground, it looked like the king was flying through the air on a magic carpet. When the crowd saw it, they fell silent. Even the Grand Vizier froze. The king landed and Scheherazade ran to him. The vizier was arrested. Jimmy finally acknowledged the existence of God and whispered a prayer. The curse broke. He became visible again, returned to his own century, free at last. The king made Jimmy his new Grand Vizier, and warned him never to look at his wife the wrong way or lose his head like the last one. And that's how it ended. At least, that's what they say. But if you ever see an old lamp washed ashore after a storm, don't touch it, not unless you're ready for the story to start again. Drop a like and subscribe.